Welcome back to our coverage from AWS reInvent 2017. My name's Ian Massingham. I'm with the Technology Evangelism team here at AWS, and this is our penultimate segment of the day. We're joined by another one of our service teams from AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, a service team that have been involved in launching a new, well, not just one, but a suite of new services this week. So we have a longer segment here to give the team a little bit more time to talk about some of the new things that they've announced this week. And as we've done in every other segment, I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, so I'd ask you first of all if you could both briefly introduce yourselves and explain to the viewers on the stream which team at AWS you work on, please.
Sure, so my name's Keith Wimes. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for a division called AWS Elemental. It was through an acquisition that happened just over 2 years ago, and we were basically plugged into Edge Services. And we run video software products, so we build those, and we'll talk a little bit about what we launched on Monday.
Great, excellent.
And I'm Evan Staton. I'm a solutions architect with AWS Elemental. I joined around the time of the acquisition.
Okay, great. Now, I come from the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent, and I know that in the UK, media customers were really, really early adopters of AWS. We've got customers over there like Channel 4 TV, as well as the BBC, that are using AWS at high scale as part of their media production workflow for video on demand, and also now for broadcast content. So there's early alignment there, obviously, between the needs of media customers and the kind of services that AWS provides. Can you talk, though, in a little bit more detail about precisely why media customers like to use the cloud quite so much, and why they push ahead with innovation using the cloud so fast?
Yeah, I think video has changed a lot over the last decade. I think we'd all agree with that, right? If you think back to the way it used to be with video on the internet.
Well, if you have children, do they watch linear TV? My
Not
kids
anymore.
don't touch it, so
no.
yeah.
They don't even know what it is.
I still watch it.
You do?
Yeah,
For
does that make
sports.
me old? Or?
Yeah, apparently. But you know, it's really changed a lot over the years, right? So back in the day, the internet video was a postage stamp size. There were a lot of spinning pinwheels, and there was an underlying technology called adaptive streaming that came out about a decade ago, and it opened up all the possibilities of different devices that could receive video. And getting to all those devices, when you're just doing it to a TV set, it's relatively easy, it's relatively standardized. There was 60 years of history behind that, and BBC obviously was one of the real early innovators in the TV space, even going back to the 30s. But getting to all of these devices and being able to monetize content wherever the viewer wants is really important. It puts the viewers in control, right? They want to be able to do it at a trade show, at an event that they're at. They want to be able to do it on their way to work. And so when you go back to around the time of the iPad coming out, that was a key moment when video needed to be on other devices beyond the TV set. Before that, it was kind of a nice to have. That was the first time that it was really important to be there. And then it cascaded down to mobile phones, and then obviously with smart TVs and all the connected devices that are on there, like the Fire TV. There's a plethora of devices. And when you do that, you have to make many versions of the video in order to get it there and have a seamless experience for that consumer. And so that creates complexity, and we simplify that for users. It also creates lots of spikes in demand, so live events that are going over the internet, like this one, you never know. You know how many users are watching at any point in time, but it
we
can
didn't know
change.
at the beginning, exactly right.
It can change, right? And so being able to cope with those spikes is really important for media companies, and this is going more broad. So it's not just media and entertainment companies that have to do this. Corporations are delivering video. They're treating their employees as viewers. They're a community that they want to get their message to. Education, being able to do training, being able to do things with the government, security applications. What we're going to talk about, we think, is applicable to media and entertainment, and mostly so, but it also extends to other verticals.
Yeah, so this is following a trend that we've seen elsewhere with AWS, which is as you make the resources lower cost and more accessible to customers, counterintuitively, a lot more of those resources get consumed. So as it becomes cheaper and easier to produce high quality video content, more people want to create it, more people want to consume it because the quality goes up and the whole market expands, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of scale, a lot of people use the phrase scale in the video world. Obviously at AWS, scale is one of the primary benefits that we can deliver. And in the video world, it's exciting because it's not just us saying our customers can create scale for us. It's not just that we're aggregating the resources across maybe 1,000 customers, but it's across 1 million customers, right? Because there's all the IT applications have created that scale for us. And I think as an entity that was acquired by AWS 2 years ago, we kind of knew the vernacular of scale, but we haven't truly known it until we actually went in to the console to develop services that would be available to anyone basically on the planet.
So, in your introduction, you mentioned that you work for a part of the organization, AWS Media Services. We talked a little bit about why media customers like to use AWS and use the cloud. Can you talk a little bit more about AWS Media Services, what kind of services you've focused on historically, and give a little bit more flavor and detail about precisely what products and services you provide to help customers in this important vertical?
Sure. Yeah, so AWS, it's AWS Elemental, and then AWS Media Services is the category within the console.
Okay.
So we were acquired 2 years ago. We basically spent from 2010 to 2015 building up capability that was essentially very robust software stack for video processing. We do things like encoding, so the compression that's utilized to get the video over the internet and over Wi-Fi networks and bandwidth constrained networks. We do packaging. Packaging technology allows you to get to different players and different devices. We created essentially what was originally perpetual licenses, and we productized it as an appliance that would be put into a data center, into a broadcast.
So a customer would end up with an Elemental box in their broadcast center?
Typical scenario. But what we did do is we saw the evolution to the cloud early, and we decided to standardize at the time for our cloud offering on top of AWS. So we built essentially, it was a service, a platform as a service, I would call it, built on EC2 that had our software stack. But it was a little bit, we had to manage it. We had to still manage the capacity. This is where the scale element comes in. We had to manage that capacity for customers. We could aggregate across our customers, but we had a bit of control with it. So over the course of time, we've supported companies that are the content producers. So the BBC in the UK is a good example. Folks like ESPN and MLBAM in the US, different sports leagues, and even studios. We also support the distributors of content, both new distributors of content that are doing over-the-top offerings, so just internet-delivered video, as well as traditional cable, satellite, telcos that are doing video in a more traditional way. We help them have a single solution that can do that, and now we're taking the next steps. And so that's why we're here at reInvent with the big announcement.
So we're getting on to the meat of the discussion now. So maybe you can take us through the services that you launched. Now these services were launched really late on Sunday night, right? So
we call it Monday morning early.
Yeah, that's right, 1 a.m. if I recall correctly. Being woken by an announcement on my phone saying that they'd gone out. So can you take us through the 5 services that you've launched? We've got a little bit more time in this segment, so quick description of the services. We can go beyond that, really let's get into the detail and understand what these services are, what kind of problems they help customers solve, and what they look like in the console in usage as well. I'd like to turn it over to you two guys to talk us through that.
Yeah, so I'll give a description, and then we'll maybe go right into the console and do some services.
Excellent.
So essentially in the console, there are categories. There's the typical ones of compute and storage and database, and there are new ones that have launched in the last couple years, and IoT and artificial intelligence. Now there's a category called Media Services, and on Monday we launched 5 services. They all start with AWS Elemental, just to signify that they are coming from our engineers, because we're pretty well known in the video market. We're deep in this space. And 3 of them, three of them are based on existing solutions that we had in data centers that we're essentially migrating to a SaaS, pay-as-you-go scenario up in the cloud. So the first one is called Media Live. So that's a live encoding platform. So if you have a live event like this one, it would be sourced typically from an encoder, a physical encoder on the ground, and we produce those as well. But it will go up to the cloud, and then it will be compressed into different formats to then go downstream. That's the first service offering, so live encoding. Second one is called Media Convert. Media Convert takes files, so this may be movies or clips, highlights, SVOD content, anything that you would find as a clip or a highlight or a full episodic content, and we convert it into the different versions. It's a form of compression where you don't have to run in real time. You can take your time, make it the best quality possible.
For each specific device type that you want to do.
For each device type, or for different parts of the value chain. So movie studios will create mezzanine level formats, really high quality, high bitrate content that is essentially lossless, so that's perfect. It could be distributed to their distributors, and then it's reconverted again for the final delivery. So that's the second service offering. The third one is called Media Package. So it is a just-in-time packaging technology. So when you're serving videos and a CDN is making a request on behalf of a user to deliver that video, you don't know what kind of device is going to be making that request. You have a hunch that it could be an iOS device or an Android device. You know it's going to be a Roku in the US in particular. But you make in real time those decisions to format it specifically for that player.
Okay, so you have to, therefore you can reduce the amount of library storage that you need.
Exactly.
One master copy and a number of converted
You have
streams.
one copy and you're making decisions based on the demand that's happening.
Okay.
The fourth offering and the fifth offering are extensions of our capability. So we didn't have these necessarily previously on the ground, but these are two of the more difficult problems that exist in the industry. The first one is called Media Store. It's a media optimized storage and origination service. And so it's really good at storing the video as small files and reacting to changes in demand. Typically customers are using, for instance, S3, and S3 is underneath this. This is an example of AWS going just up the stack a little bit and optimizing an underlying building block for a specific application, in this case video. So it's really good at doing fast reads and writes of video files, which can be as short as 2 seconds. The way that adaptive streaming works is it's a stream that comes and then another request will come from the player and then that will be sent down. Okay. So this particular origin service is able to react really quickly to those requests basically that are coming from the CDN.
Understand?
The CDN is probably CloudFront, right? So that's one in the suite, but it could be in a multi-CDN strategy, it could be coming from other CDN players as well. And then the fifth one is a really cool one. It's solving the monetization challenge that exists in the industry. So typical broadcast content, it's monetized either through some form of subscription, right? So you pay for a cable lineup, and then there's advertising as well. And there's different forms of advertising in the internet world. For internet delivered video, I think the monetization is still being figured out. And what we've come out with is a service called MediaTailor that customizes the content, and in particular the ads, for personalization to those end users at scale.
Yep. It's actually a use case that I'm familiar with from Channel 4 in the UK. They've built systems for this themselves, so they could offload that potentially to a service like this to minimize the amount of heavy lifting they have, right?
Yeah. When you start to do personalization at scale for streamed video, there are basically playlists that are generated, and when it's custom for each viewer, then
based on demographic data that you may hold about them.
You're getting a scaling problem that we're really good at handling because of the size of our underlying infrastructure and the geographic distribution. So about a month ago, we were able to start to disclose that MediaTailor, while we hadn't announced it yet, has been used in production for Amazon Video's live streaming of NFL football on Thursday nights. So they've done 8 games, they've done something like 11.2 million viewers over those 8 games. And they're doing basically global scale, so 187 countries, which is a lot of countries, and doing personalization at the level that they've decided for their business purpose makes sense.
Oh, so there you've got potentially different localized advertising packages for each one of those different countries with different media sales organizations in each country selling ads. So
exactly.
That's a whole new level of complexity, right?
Exactly. So, and you know, we're kind of a video pipeline, so we're really good at the core video elements, but there's third-party ecosystem partners that will control our software, control our service. And one of those is, for instance, an ad decisioning server. So we don't get into the decisions about which ads go to which customers, but we act on those decisions from...
pulling the content from the library or converting it into the stream and then playing it out to that specific user. Yeah, I understand.
So I think we can do... Should we do a demo? Or
let's see the demo. Let's switch over to the desk laptop here and let's see what you have to show us.
We'll let Evan take over.
Let me drive for a minute. Yeah, so
get a break.
I'm showing you a slide. I promise I'll only do that for 2 seconds, just to show you what the workflow is here that we're going to build. Our friends at Pac-12 Networks in California were kind enough to offer us a live feed for today's demo. So we're going to take a feed from their studios in San Francisco, and we're going to run it through the Media Live and the Media Package services today. We'll show that live channel running in just a few minutes.
Right.
So as we do with any AWS service, we start with the console, or the CLI, but in this case, the console. And as you can see, as Keith mentioned, these media services are now highlighted right here in the middle, of which there are actually 6. We launched 5, but for those who use Elastic Transcoder, that's still there, that still works, we still support it, and that'll continue to be there. So, we're going to start 2 services now. One is Media Live, and the other is Media Package. And I want to, I guess, stop for a moment and just explain what those 2 things are doing in this process. Media Live is going to be creating those, what we call the ABR Bouquet that Keith mentioned a few minutes ago. Those are the different renditions for different devices or different network settings and bandwidth availability, essentially, so that the players, whether it be your phone, tablet, or at home, can choose which bitrate is appropriate for them. So Media Live is going to take that feed that comes from Pac-12 in this case, and it's going to transcode that to 4 different bitrates. You get like a high-level HD, you get a mid-tier HD, and then you get a couple SD variants for when your bandwidth really starts to get choked. So you don't get an outage, ideally ever, right? You just go to the lowest bitrate, so you still always have your video available. The packager then, downstream of that, is going to take those ABR versions and package them into HLS, which is the standard that iOS uses to play back video. And when we do that, we're going to create what's called a M3U8, which is the master manifest that's going to have all the derivative manifests built into it. And you can see all the different video segments if you open that in a text editor. So let me dive in. I'll show you the process of making a live channel and the package.
I think most people at home, when they have a video on their computer, they kind of know it as one file, right? Yep. And you can play that back on your computer and you can watch a video. And back in the day, you would download that, really early on, you'd wait overnight for that video if it was high enough quality, right? And today what happens for video delivery, the reason why it's become so good is this adaptive ABR bouquet.
So you swap in different bit rates as appropriate for whatever the client's quality of connection is?
Yeah, so you're sending chunks of it and then the player is saying what they can handle at the time. And I think a lot of people will realize if you go into like a typical movie that you're going to watch on the TV, the first few frames or the first few 10 seconds, say, will look kind of not so great.
Yeah, and then it ratchets up to 2 or 4K depending on what you have and you're away.
Because it doesn't know at first what kind of bandwidth you have.
So it starts slow and then progressively dumps more bandwidth in as the quality
as it learns more about your connectivity.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so the first thing you're going to do when you set up a Media Live channel is you're going to set up an input. I did one before, so I'll use that one just because it has a IP address attached to it already, which is where our feed is coming in. But essentially, you get to choose between RTP, RTMP, and HLS. Those are the RTMP has 2 variants, push and pull, and then you create a security group or you use a security group. So for the example that we're going to use, let's just allow everybody in. This is a whitelist. So you're locking down, if you only want to accept a source from one destination, or one source rather, into your destination, you would lock this down to like a /32, for example, and just keep it 1-to-1, or 33, or 30 rather. So you can create a security group. And here we go. So there's the CIDR block. We're going to allow everybody in, which is not a good idea in practice. It's a good idea for now.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. And here's our RTMP input. It gives you 2 destinations, so you're going to get 2 availability zones, essentially, a primary and a backup, all within one region. In this case, we're using Oregon, as I selected up here. And this is going to be where you're going to point your contribution encoder from the ground up into the cloud. So,
do most contribution encoders support 2 endpoints, so a primary and a secondary endpoint?
The ones I use do.
Yeah.
At this point, most of them do. Yeah. You can add several outputs to your encoders. AWS Elemental has an encoder that runs on premise as well, and you could add any number of
That's
of
actually
used for
that's used for a lot of Twitch source feeds. So that's one connectivity point that we have with Twitch, is that our encoders will often be in a gaming environment or whatnot. And I know Twitch does much more than that now. but our encoders are sometimes used for that. One of the key things that Evan highlighted is the fact that the redundancy, the resiliency is built into the service for Media Live. So we are assuming that you have to have 100% uptime.
Yeah.
When you're doing live events, I don't care how small it is, even if you're just streaming to 300 people, you don't want that to go down. And so we build it in and it's one cost. Whereas when customers manage these types of things, they actually have to manage that redundancy and make decisions and then duplicate cost. We've buried it into the underlying cost of the service.
Yeah, typically it's necessary to do so. You know, in the past when this was all in data centers that were owned by the M&E customers, they would build redundant racks, redundant facilities. They would sometimes be buying 4 encoders just for one channel, or more sometimes if it's like super, critical content. So in any case, here we have 2. Here's our RTP input we set up. Then we're going to go over to Media Live, and no channels currently exist because we're brand new. You're going to specify an IAM role here. In this case, I created one called Media Live Access Role. If you need to do that, Media Live will actually do it for you. There's this center radio button that you can click, and it'll create it for you. In this case, I did it in advance. And then there's a number of templates that we've released at launch for sort of commonly used ABR stacks. The choices are HTTP live streaming, which is the suggestion from Apple, which gives you, I forget off the top of my head, it looks like 10 different discrete outputs, as you can see on the side here in the output groups when I selected that.
Yep.
And again, it starts at 1080 and goes all the way down to 416 by 234, which is a 200K stream. In this case, because we're pulling something in that probably has a lot of motion from a live sports channel, we can use our live action setting here, which only gives us 4, but I guess they're at a more favorable encoder settings for live action.
Higher frame rate output.
Yeah. So we'll use that, and then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to attach an input. And in this case, we're going to attach the input that we just built. There's only one here. Again, it shows us the input destinations once more. And the rest of these are network input settings that I like the defaults. I'm going to leave them here.
One of the things that customers that are familiar with video will notice about this is that there is actually a lot of control, right? So because we've come from the M&E world, from the broadcast world, those customers really like to have control of all the dials.
Yep.
And a lot of the solutions that have been out there in the past in terms of maybe cloud-based encoding are dumbed down a little bit.
Yeah, too simple.
We've taken all the capability that these broadcast players have and we're bringing it to the masses, and they can use it if they want to, or if they don't want to, that's okay too. They can use defaults as much as they want.
I happen to really like the defaults. I actually complimented the product manager for this after launch. It's like, you know what, you did a really nice job with these input settings.
Makes your job easier too, right?
It's so much easier. I don't have to go in and tweak all the frame rates and everything like that. It's there and it works, right? So we're going to use the defaults on the input here. The next thing over here on the left, you get something called general settings, which gives you a number of options for avail blanking and blackout slates based on triggers that you might want. But today I'm going to use the global configuration tab here. I'm going to enable it. And the thing I'm going to choose is input loss behavior. You know, a lot of times, ideally it doesn't happen, but sometimes you might get a loss to your input. And what you don't want to have happen when that happens is black on air. You want to fall back to something. So, you know, we support a number of different options for when you do lose your input. We'll repeat some frames. We'll put up a black frame, or we'll put up a color. But my favorite is you can put up a slate. You can choose an image.
Yep. Picture of yourself.
A picture of myself.
Picture
in this
Ian.
case,
Why not?
just because we've been doing
At the end of a day.
Yeah, right. I don't have a picture of Ian. I have a picture
have
of
a cat
I have a
photo.
picture of a cat. I
Okay,
got a
close
cat.
enough.
We only support cats with memes. We don't support standalone cats.
No standalone cats? Well, we're going to use standalone cat. And basically, you know, you just paste this in, and that's it. So you're good there. Then you're going to go to your HD. Here's your output groups that we talked about.
Yep.
and you need to add URLs. These are the destinations, and these destinations that you're going to put in here are from the packager that I was talking about before. So remember, it goes Media Live out into the packager. So here we're going to set the destinations, and I opened the packager over here, and here we got to create a new channel. I'm going to call it Channel 1. Description is optional. If you have something to say about cat slates or something like that, that's where you can put that. You're given 3 things over here on the right-hand side. I want to use my hand, and then I realize that
they
doesn't.
Don't see your hand.
That doesn't translate, does it?
No.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you get your input URL, and this you're just going to copy-paste this, and you're going to put it in here. And then there's a username and password, which you want because it allows your packager to know that it's really your content that's getting to it, and nobody else from the wild can come in and override your stuff. So there's a password.
One thing that I didn't mention about media packages is not just a packager, but it also does just-in-time DRM, so content protection.
Yep.
It's one of the challenges that the video world has had, or that we view as a challenge, is that a lot of the encoders that are out there today, they have to actually integrate to the DRM, and so it creates a lot of parallel integrations that take place.
Complexity as well.
Yeah, what we've actually done here is we've created our own standard for how to interface with our platform, and so the DRM vendors, we've got 6 of them. We haven't announced who they are yet, but we've got 6 of them that are available to protect the content, to do all different types of content protection and encryption of the videos so that we can control who has access to it, when they have access to it, how long do they have access to it, things like that.
Yeah.
Did I steal from you?
No, it's a really good point. You bought me a minute of poking around on the computer.
Okay, good.
But I had to repeat myself anyway, because one of the things we talked about a few minutes ago was the redundancy. So when you do set up package channels, you actually need to set up 2 of them. It's mandatory.
2 IP addresses.
Yeah. So in the packager, I've now set up channel 2, and you do the exact same thing again. You put in some credentials. Super exciting, I know. We store the passwords in EC2 parameter store. So when you create these, you can actually pull back your passwords and use them later, and they're secure. So you don't have to go and copy paste every single time. So we're going to create our Media Live parameter here. This all looks good. Again, the HLS default settings here look pretty good to me. You can tweak them if you want. How many times are you going to retry your connection if it fails? That type of stuff. And before I go ahead and create the channel, because we actually are done now, I could create channel. But before I do that, what I want to do is show you briefly this settings tab. Now this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of getting back into people who want to control all of the settings of their video encoder. So here you have your aspect ratio. You can tweak it a little bit, take it from source. If you do specified, you're going to be able to add your aspect ratio. You can select AFD, which is essentially a windowing standard that allows you to have like pillar box, or I should say letterbox and bars on the side, stuff like that. Let's just use the default here, initialize from source, and let's create our channel.
So what he just did, I think he took about 10 minutes to go through, which in this environment is about the right amount of time. When you created a live channel prior to using the cloud, with the procurement process and the staging process and the testing and the configuration, it would typically be 3 months. And so what Evan's done here is do it in about 10 minutes. I've watched our head of engineering do it in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's the record to beat.
Totally not fair.
But he's not talking.
Because I bet
he's not talking, and he didn't induce a cat overlay at all.
Challenge accepted. It was Kwaja?
Yes.
All right. So the channel's created now. There's only one thing left to do, which is hit start. And that's going to take a minute as well. So We can stand here and look at each other for a minute.
Oh, I've got two questions from the stream.
Yeah,
I can
one and then we can show the
two
output.
stream
Sounds good.
questions. So
Let's assume it worked.
just recap what you said earlier about how ad insertion works. So there's a couple of questions about how the logic for determining which ads are shown in MediaTailor
Right.
would be delivered. Is that a standards-based API, or is there some other
So
mechanism?
it's based on standard IAB, which is a standards body for advertising protocol. So VAST is an example of that, and we interface with DoubleClick as an ad decisioning server and service, as well as Comcast Freewheel, as well as Amazon's own advertising standard.
Or
so
I guess if there's a standard, you could implement your own theoretically if you want to do so.
I mean, there's various ones, but we have to make sure the protocols are right. Each one of them is a little bit different in terms of how they implement. And we basically look for those avails. So there are SCTE 35 markers in a traditional broadcast, and if the distributor of that content has the right to replace the ad, then they can say, oh, I have an avail, I'm sending it to this viewer or this classification of viewer. What type of ad should I insert? And what we do underneath is we actually transcode that ad to match the live source that that individual is receiving. So it becomes seamless and it avoids ad detection.
Resolution, same frame rate.
It avoids ad blockers that are starting to become prevalent in the video world, just like they are on a typical web environment.
Great stuff.
Yep.
You up?
What was question number 2?
Question number 2 was, this is slightly more complicated, I think. So
this might be yours.
Sure.
We'll see.
Well, I asked about implementing your own ad decisioner. A customer's asking, can you implement an ad decisioner using AWS Lambda, was the question. So, but I guess from what you've just said, the implied answer is yes.
Sure, the implied answer is yes, but what MediaTailor isn't is an ad decisioning system itself.
So that has to be external to the system.
People bring their own. You're welcome to write your own. You're welcome to write a Lambda script that can make those decisions. The VAST standard is a standard. It's public. So so long as your Lambda scripting is going to communicate using that standard, there's no reason that MediaTailor won't be able to communicate to it.
Great stuff. That's all we have on stream questions, but if you do have more questions on the stream, please submit those. We've got off-stage moderators that are feeding those through to my console right here.
And I have good news. Our dinner is done. The channel is running. And that took about, 3 minutes? Something like that, which is pretty good. I'm happy. So we go back to our packager. That's where our preview window is going to be. And if you hit refresh here, you're going to notice that this manifest preview is now showing you the details of that M3U8 master manifest that I was showing you, and the sub-manifests within it that it references. You can look at the raw data here if that's of interest to you. You can see the different files here that it's referencing, and essentially your player is going from the top-level manifest, grabbing the bitrate manifest that it needs, and then going and getting the actual video segments that it needs. In addition to that, we have a playback preview right here, and if all goes well, here it is. We got the Pac-12 network from Pac-12 Mountain. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. This is coming live from San Francisco.
Great.
Looks pretty good.
Yeah, excellent. Good stuff. Okay, so I'm being motioned that we're almost out of time. Is there anything else you guys want to cover in this segment?
I don't think so. We just thank you for the time.
No, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
And we do hope that people will go into the console. Just go to aws.amazon.com/media services to find out more and give it a try.
Great
There's
stuff.
no fee to try, so give it a shot.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us on twitch.tv/AWS.
Thank you.
We're going to take a very, very short break, and then we'll be back with a recap of all of today's activity here at AWS reInvent. So rejoin our evangelism team in 3 minutes. Thank you.